So thanks everyone for joining us today. Looking through the attendees on the webinar and listening to some of the questions that have been supplied so far, it's clear to me that there's varying levels of the understanding of what the eSIM proposition is. So as we at Zest4 officially launch our own eSIM proposition to channel, I wanted to take the time today to run through a few things to get so that everyone's got a general level of understanding around what it is, what it offers, and how it differs from the standard IoT SIM solution. As such, I apologize if I cover off a few things that you already know. Just bear with me. I'm sure there'll be something for everyone within the session. Also joining me today, as Kaylee says, is John from KORE. KORE have been selling this solution now in Europe for some time, so he brings with him some experience and knowledge from live accounts that are using eSIM, and he's going to share a case studies later in the webinar. So as we get started, one of the big questions that I get all the time is a very simple question, but what is an eSIM? Well, the term eSIM comes from the technical term EUICC, which is an embedded universal integrated circuit. So you can see it's much easier to just call it an eSIM. The term embedded, though, is where people get confused, as they assume it's not actually a SIM card as we know it, but a bit of circuitry on a board that's built into a module, into a cellular device. Well, it can be this, but it can also be a plastic SIM card that we've all come to know and love. So what I'd suggest is you forget about the terminology for now and just think of an eSIM as a single SIM card that has the ability to remotely switch carriers. And don't get this confused with a SIM card that roams. A roaming SIM is a SIM that has a single carrier but roams on and off of different networks, but we're going to cover that in more detail in a second. So eSIM technologies enable users to remotely switch from one carrier profile to another via a series of over-the-air commands that are sent directly to the device, as opposed to physically removing and swapping a SIM card. With all the provisioning managed remotely, eSIM prevents technology or carrier lock-in for IoT devices that are deployed over a long period of time. It enables, I suppose, future-proofed IoT deployments. This gives significant benefits and efficiencies when using an eSIM. So, if the eSIM can be the same form factor as a normal SIM, what's the difference? Well, a simple comparison is here to see. A traditional SIM card will have a single carrier profile. So for ease of explanation, I'll talk about something that we all know. Let's assume it's an O2 SIM card. The O2 profile means you can access O2 in the UK, and using the O2 profile and O2's agreed roaming rates, you can roam on other networks when outside of the UK. But if you wanted to stop using O2 and then use Vodafone, you'd have to physically switch the SIM card out. An eSIM will be carrier specific, but it can support multiple profiles. So using the same example, if you wanted to switch networks from O2 to Vodafone, you could simply just swap the profile over the air without the need to swap the SIM. So a standard SIM means one SIM for each carrier, where an eSIM will give you one SIM for multiple carriers. Okay, so I like this slide. Hopefully it will answer some questions that some of you have already. What we've done, I've tried to compile the 5 most common things that I'm asked in relation to eSIM. And what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to bring John into the conversation and ask him to join me and answer a few questions and hopefully dispel a few myths on eSIM. So John, if you're ready, I'm going to pose you a few questions. I think we've touched on this already, but one of the first thing I'm asked, are all eSIM cards embedded?
Yes, hi Anton. Yeah, so it's a very common question. It's one that we've already touched on, and I suppose that you know the E does stand for embedded, but eSIMs are not necessarily soldable SIMs, and they can be offered in all other form factors, including the removable plastic cards. But I think when talking about eSIM in the context of the EUICC capability, that's where the important element comes in, that they're remotely programmable, giving you the ability to provision the different profiles over the air.
Perfect. And just to answer a further supplementary question that comes in on this quite a bit, at Zest4, when we're providing you with an eSIM on a standard plastic SIM, you'll get the standard triple form factor SIM card that is completely non-branded. Next thing I get, John, quite a bit. I suppose this has come about since sort of Apple have started pushing an eSIM type solution in their devices. Are consumer eSIMs and IoT eSIMs all the same?
Yeah, again, it's one of those questions that's becoming more and more common now, and the answer essentially is no. So when you look at the consumer SIM, the IoT SIM, the specifications and the behaviours will differ. So they are completely different products, but at a high level, the IoT eSIM has carrier profiles pushed to it, whereas a consumer eSIM will have those profiles pulled from the device.
Perfect. Giving obviously the user complete control about which profile they're using at any one time. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's always got to be one about cost. So eSIM cards, are they more costly than a traditional SIM card, John?
Yeah, it does raise a few eyebrows and a few questions with some people, because the eSIM will have a slightly higher cost. But this is an upfront cost, and the cost efficiency comes in the long term, as they remove the cost for things that may not be budgeted for, such as those associated with SIM swaps. So yeah, visiting those devices and having to physically change those SIMs. But the eSIM also typically has a greater longevity, so it means that they're a much better long-term investment for people.
Absolutely, perfect. And because eSIM's obviously designed for an IoT application, I have to be honest, some of the upfront costs aren't really as high as sort of people assume that we're seeing. Question number 4, again, big confusion on this one. Is eSIM the same as a soft SIM?
Yeah, so the soft SIM is also referred to as an iSIM, and it is easy to get confused on these, but the soft SIM or iSIM doesn't actually involve a physical card. It's integrated directly into the module. So whereas your eSIM is the physical element, albeit plastic or an embedded chip. So the easy way to answer it is eSIMs are hardware based, whereas your iSIM or your soft SIM are software based.
Perfect. And last but not least, as we move on to question 5, again, quite a confusing one for some people. Is eSIM technology the same as a multi-IMSI SIM?
It's a confusing and common again, but the simple answer is eSIM is defined through GSMA standards for remote SIM provisioning technologies, and this is what gives you the interoperability across the different carriers. Now, how the multi-IMSI solution differs is that there's not really any defined standards or specifications, and this, I suppose, in some instances could lead to more complexity and cost when you compare it to the remote provisioning solution that an eSIM service would provide you.
Perfect, thanks, John. Now, I'm sure, excuse me, I'm sure there's a lot more questions other than those 5, and there'll be some opportunity at the end of the day for people to ask sort of further questions on this. But moving on, if we now understand how eSIM is different, you're able to comprehend what this is likely to do to connectivity in the IoT space. Now, analysts are forecasting a compound annual growth rate of over 16% in the next 5 years due to the ease of provisioning on an eSIM and the opportunities that this is going to open up in manufacturing and the IoT space. It was originally the auto sector that drove the need for remotely programmable SIM cards. Traditional SIM cards just wouldn't work in the connected car space. As you can imagine, vehicles are manufactured generally in one country and then shipped worldwide. This means manufacturers that either need the ability to remotely program a SIM with the network that it needed when the vehicle was delivered, or to have network relationships with almost every carrier worldwide, which, excuse me, clearly wouldn't work. So with the GSMA specifications and interoperability now in place with eSIMs, they're being deployed across IoT verticals worldwide and not just in the connected car space. And according to another industry report, eSIM shipment volumes are expected to grow by more than 300% between now and 2023. With exponential growth driven by business demands and simplified long-term IoT connectivity solutions, it's a really positive place to be. And if we look at the map, this gives a good indication. The areas in green are already seeing a high take-up of eSIM. The areas in red are areas where take-up has been slow, and this could be due to the lack of an eSIM availability or lack of understanding. But here in the UK, we're all in amber. Now, this shows us there's a desire to take up the solution, but still lots of scope for growth. So now really is the prime time for us to be pushing eSIM into this IoT space. And if your customers are manufacturers or sellers of connected hardware, then for a while there have been considerations and challenges that they have to take into consideration before they push something out. So when rolling out an IoT project, you need to consider the device. I suppose what SIM form factors go into it? Is it fixed? Do you need to access it? Does the device need to be secure? Is it 2G, 3G, 4G, low power? Is the SIM soldered into a module, or can the SIM be replaced? From connectivity point of view, I suppose the considerations are, what network do I need? Where will it be used? Can I future-proof it by sticking with one network? From a manufacturing point of view, the complications such as stock holding, if you've got to keep multiple carriers of stock of SIMing, how many network relationships do you have to manage? And then in-life complications such as sort of servicing, provisioning, or location changes of devices. All of the above are really key pain points when selling a connected device, all of which we can now simplify and minimize when rolling out an eSIM solution as opposed to a standard SIM. The key to success here will be finding out the critical pain points for your customers and then showing them how a solution using eSIM will deliver against this. So in summary for this sort of first section, what you'll be able to propose to prospective customers now using eSIM is one single SIM in a form factor that suits their needs, irrespective of what region it's going to be used in, what the location is, and the type of device. This means one single relationship to manage from a network point of view, and only one line item to consider when building a device prior to shipping. For those that have worked with Zest4 for some time, you'll have used our Zest4 Connect management portal and know the benefits of having all your SIMs in one place. Our eSIM prop's not going to be any different from you. We will have one management interface for all your network customers, which I'll show you later. And all of these will be connected either on a Zest4 shared private APN, or if the deal dictates, a dedicated APN for all of your customers. And all the eSIMs that we supply will be fully over-the-air programmable. With each profile you set, you'll have the ability to use either a single network or multi-networks in a single country. So it's going to be a fully flexible solution that will help you future-proof all your IoT rollouts. So in a second, I'm going to hand over to John, because we know what eSIM is now. We know the benefits of it. So we now want to see eSIM in action. And as I say, John, working with KORE, has been selling and pushing eSIM into customers for a while now. So John, can I ask you to talk us through eSIM in action, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Anton. Yeah, so I just want to take a few moments just to talk through a few things based on the experience of ourselves and obviously working with Zest4. And some of this falls into the considerations and the challenges that Anton's already discussed. And quite a bit of that comes in terms of the future-proofing of your solution. And what we typically tend to see, there's the historical challenges that are faced with the development and deployment of IoT solutions, and these typically tend to be costly, complex, unsecure, and we're now seeing more and more governments engaging to protect the MNOs, the carriers, with restrictions and regulations in certain countries. So what the eSIM does is it provides you with a future-proof solution that reduces the complexity of services by helping to expand the lifespans of those devices and reduce the maintenance, whilst providing ability to switch between those carriers over the air. And as we've mentioned previously, that sort of eliminates some of those not necessarily budgeted costs for having to service those devices and perform those SIM swaps. So I suppose, to put it simply, the eSIM mitigates the challenges such as carrier coverage, technology, sunsetting, and price, and in turn it helps to streamline your manufacturing logistical processes, and it allows for a more rapid deployment of solutions and services, both to local markets as well as any new geographies that you're looking to go into. So it means that the risks relating to connectivity, interoperability, regional regulatory mandates are reduced, and in some cases are removed, helping to ensure that service and maintenance SLA is consistent. So it's very easy and quick to recognise that eSIM solutions are a lot more agile and a lot more efficient and easily scalable, regardless of where the devices end up going. And we tend to find that a lot of these devices are deployed into environments that are extreme, isolated, or hard to access. So the eSIM technology ultimately helps to deliver some of the long-term assurances needed for IoT solutions that are not otherwise available. And it offers the capability to manage a simpler, future-proof service transition, such as solutions, technologies, and as the requirements evolve. So to have a look a little bit at the journey and how it works. And it typically comes in two parts, both which are applicable to future-proofing. But if you look at the first three steps, the manufacturing, the shipping, and the installation, they're typically deemed to be a one-time activity that is gone through during the initial deployment. And what's considered to be more future-proof centric, I suppose, are steps 4 and 5 on the right-hand side of this flow. And these steps simply highlight the ability to manage and change profiles as the need arises. So again, new profiles may want to be applied for lots of different reasons, such as technology changes and sunset, or just to adopt another carrier profile. But the key point remains that this is a remote management capability, avoiding the need of physical SIM changes in devices, again, in those isolated or hard to reach environments. And one of the things that I just want to mention on this slide as well, because this is a question that often comes up around the activation of SIMs and how eSIM activations could differ from others. So they don't necessarily differ from a standard UICC SIM. And they don't necessarily have to be live from day one. So they can typically be supplied in an inactive or a test or a ready state, and none of these are ordinarily billable. So these SIMs can be deployed, or eSIMs can be deployed and be ready to go in advance of the charges for usage, which then apply only from the point of the eSIM transitioning into that active state. And so just to give a bit of context from an eSIM case study, this is one where eSIM was successfully adopted by Stedin. So to give a little bit of background, Stedin is a large regional grid operator based in the Netherlands, who are responsible for delivering electricity and gas services to roughly 2 million commercial and residential properties. And as part of their operation, they saw this need to deploy a large number of smart meters to enhance their smart automatic reading capabilities. And the challenge that they initially faced, as is with many utilities, is that the smart meters are typically deployed for a long period of time. And some of these are designed to be in the field for up to 15 years and not necessarily expect to be visited or serviced in that time. The lengthy life cycle here, though, puts Stedin at a bit of a risk due to potential cellular technology changes or even commercial disagreements that would result in the need for them to change networks or connectivity providers during that device life cycle. And with a high cost associated with smart meter or SIM replacements, Stedin looked towards a connectivity solution that would eliminate all of these challenges, such as technology and carrier lock-in, without having to physically change that SIM or replace the device. And the other factor that had to be brought into this was that the Stedin solution needed to be compliant with Dutch smart metering standards and the emerging telecom legislation for the utilities sector. So to resolve these challenges, KORE worked with Stedin to deliver a multifaceted eSIM solution, and a deployment of a carrier-independent OTA platform was performed that guaranteed Stedin the ability to fully transfer the services without the physical SIM swaps. And this was all facilitated by the eSIM technology. But with the OTA platform, it also incorporated a Steading specific carrier profile. So this enabled Steading to host their own specific IMSI range, which essentially allows them to act as an independent carrier to ensure that they complied with the regulations. They were able to provision a much greater support for their large-scale rollouts. They had an enhanced SIM management capability, and it ensured the longevity of the connected meters. So based on this, this deployment has gone live with Steading, and today there's approximately 1.3 million eSIMs deployed across their base. And just to, if anyone's interested in the case study for Steading, we have actually included that in the handout area of this webinar. So feel free to download that, where there's a bit more detail in terms of Steading and how they achieve the success with eSIM. But just to summarize before I hand back to Anton, the Zest4 eSIM offering powered by KORE delivers you a truly carrier agnostic solution, which is resilient, secure, and universally compatible with any technology. And this service will provide access to over 500 networks in over 180 countries, utilizing multiple carrier relationships. And it's all integrated into one core network, meaning your global connectivity is delivered through a portfolio of carrier eSIM profiles, which ultimately provide you with the true single solution to overcome the connectivity challenges that we have been and will continue to discuss during this webinar. So with that, I will hand back to Anton.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate that, and some great insight. And as John said, if anybody wants to download the case study at the end of this sort of webinar, then feel free to do so. So the next thing I'm going to talk about really is the portal. What I'm not going to do is spend too much time on the portal, because if I'm being honest, that could be a whole new webinar in itself. So if anybody wants to see this working and live and operating, I'm happy to set up an online demo at any time moving forwards for you guys. Excuse me. But for now, let me share with you what we will give you access to, so you've got some indication. It's a fully hierarchical portal, so you can see all of your customers and all of their base, but your customers can only see their own. All eSIMs and customers are going to be in one place, irrespective of the network that they're using or the carrier profile that they're using. So one simple view under one pane of glass. The ability to view and manage either single SIMs or full SIM estates. The ability to see real-time SIM monitoring, visibility of data utilization that's going to allow you to set caps, alerts, and various other rules to fully automate the SIM estate. All of this with the ability to API into the platform for easy integration of your own current platform or your customer's platform. Sorry guys, I'm just having a few technical problems moving on. So how do we sell eSIM? Again, this is not going to be a sales tutorial, so I'm not going to try and tell you how to sell eSIM, but there are a few things that I do want to highlight when you've got access to the eSIM proposition. So the first thing, if it's a true IoT rollout, the impact of having to do a SIM switch at some point in the future, this could just be a change of network, a change of contract, or a technology sunset. But a lot of true IoT rollouts are designed to go for sort of 5-10 years without the device being sort of attended. So you need to make sure that the SIM solution you're putting in there is going to have the same longevity as the device itself. It's no point having a device that's going to last 10 years if the SIM will only last you for 3. Coverage challenges and network resilience. If the device hasn't yet been sold, how do you know where it's going to land and what network it's going to need? So again, key question to be asking when pushing eSIM. Does it need to be a soldered SIM, i.e. a secure SIM in a device, or a plastic SIM? The need for deploying it in different regions with different regulatory limitations, e.g. some areas won't let you do permanent roaming. So if you're accessing a local network, it sort of counteracts the need for that. Complexity and cost managing multiple carrier SIMs. Again, always going to be critical for a manufacturer that's putting out a lot of devices in different locations. So that's They're the key things I think that we should be talking about when pushing an eSIM solution. So if we look at sort of, I suppose, next, what's following this webinar, there are 3 critical things that I want everyone to take away from this webinar today. The first one, make it easy for your customers to navigate network selection problems. Simplify the complexity of achieving regional network access for global resilient coverage. The second piece, eliminate the customer's need for a physical SIM swap. If a network change is needed, customers don't need to or have to go out to visit the devices. Streamline logistics management and global expansion. And I suppose the third thing is mitigating operational risks of unforeseen network sunsets. Again, an IoT rollout that could be lasting sort of 5-10 years, it doesn't necessarily mean that the tariff or the network or the solution that you have in place with a single SIM is going to last for 5 or 10 years. All of this will minimize the total cost of ownership over the lifetime of deployments. So investing in a little bit more upfront could save a significant amount over a longer period. But as with everything in life, not all eSIMs are created equal. At Zest4, we pride ourselves in offering the best of all worlds. We're not tied to any single network carrier. We're completely agnostic in what we offer. This means we can usually offer much more than the network would be able to offer direct, from functionality or even price. Excuse me. And I'm not going to go through all of the line items on this slide, but be assured we'll offer everything possible, and we have a flexible and supportive approach for winning business together using the eSIM proposition. So I think that brings us to sort of the close of the slide deck itself. But what I'd like to do now is open up for questions. I'm going to hand over to Kaylee again so she can sort of host this for us to see if there's anything we've missed or any sort of thing burning that you need to understand before we move on. Kaylee.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anton, and John, for your time on today's webinar. I think it's been a really nice, short, sharp introduction to eSIM there. And I hope the audience also found this an interesting topic. We have a few questions to address already, which is awesome, and it also gives time for any other audience members to submit their questions in the menu bar there. John, I'm going to point this one to you actually. What is your and Kore's experience on the acceptance of eSIM from big carriers like Verizon, AT&T, and Vodafone, etc.?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that's commonly raised in as well. And I suppose few carriers will fully support eSIM globally, and I think that's to say can often vary between different carriers and different countries. And I think that with some carriers they're also notably reluctant to offer their profiles to an EU ICC not managed by them, even though they know that the solution is already here. And the other point I think is it's not always clear that some carriers offer eSIM solutions that are restricted to their network or to multiple carrier options based on the alliances that they have with other operators. So I suppose looking at a carrier agnostic eSIM solution like that offered by Zest4 delivers a much greater flexibility in switching between the desired carrier networks.
Thank you very much. We did have a question there around being sent a copy of these slides. Yeah, that will be made available. Anton will come back. As mentioned, also this webinar has been and is being recorded, so this will also be made on demand. Anton, we have a great question here, around the safety of eSIM technology. We know that IoT security is a very hot topic and a hot button, and this person really wants to know, with any new technology comes a safety question. So how safe is eSIM technology?
So there's a couple of areas that I look at when I sort of talk about and think about safety. So firstly is safety in SIMing the device. If you're using an eSIM, you can have it truly embedded, or you can have a SIM that's actually built into the device at the point of manufacture, so the SIM is not accessible. That's the first thing. The benefit of that, you put the SIM in, there's no billing, there's no charges, you don't choose the network, but it can be securely put into a device at the point of manufacturer, adding an element of security there. But the second piece that comes up regularly is also, I suppose, the security of the data. And again, because we're not using any standard network APNs, we're using our own dedicated network, using our own dedicated APNs or a one dedicated to the customer. We're routing the data through a secure pipe, for want of a better word, into a secure network, adding, I suppose, another level of security over and above sticking a standard SIM card in a standard device and sharing the network APN with everyone else. So from a security point of view, obviously GSMA and everyone's sort of had a look at this, and we have to meet certain criteria to be able to sort of launch this. But I do firmly believe it offers additional levels of security over a standard SIM solution. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you mentioned the industrial use cases where devices are left in the field and you'd like them to be tamper-proof and resistant to hazardous environments. And with this over-the-air update, you know, you don't need to gain that regular access to the device. So I think that's, you know, you've made a really, really good point there. So I'm gonna, next one for John, I think this is a good one. Can any device support eSIM?
Oh, great question. So not necessarily. Typically legacy devices will not support an eSIM solution in terms of the over-the-air profile changing. An eSIM ultimately is a SIM, if you look at it from that aspect, so it would work in a device. If we're talking specifically about the EU ICC and the remote provisioning capability, no. But there are ways to test devices, and even with devices that are out in the field. So KORE, along with Zest, do provide an eSIM validation tool that will allow you to test any device to ensure that it can pick up and it can support the ability to remotely provision and change those profiles as needed. So it's something to bear in mind as part of any project that's being run. Don't just assume it's going to work. Make sure that you go through that due diligence that I'm sure everybody does, just to make sure that there's that test bed and make sure that those devices will actually support that capability.
Brilliant. And as I guess customers start to look to future technology, that, you know, the 5G, for example, they'll have to do that same check as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, devices historically have been deployed on the basis of what is available at that time. And you'll see, you know, we've seen this historically where devices have been deployed with 2G, 3G capabilities, and then 4G's come along. People are going through those technology sunset scenarios now where we're seeing the network starting to close 3G and 2G. So people are on that journey already in terms of understanding what the capabilities are and what they need to do. And part of that eSIM validation should be, or sorry, the eSIM validation should be part of that process to consider.
Absolutely, great point there. Another one for you, Anton. Can eSIMs be issued to existing clients on their contracted tariff? So can existing customers take advantage of their supplier's own embedded eSIMs, i.e. a mix and match approach?
So we can do a mix and match approach if it's new, I suppose, new connections being added to a historical estate. Where we can't do it is if, and again, these are the challenges we have with a standard SIM, if they've got SIMs that are in contract with a single network currently, the network will generally hold that customer, that SIM, to term of the initial contract that was provided. So it would be very difficult to actually swap those SIMs out without the network charging any early termination fees. But outside of that, as I say, if we're putting new connections into an existing estate, then yes, absolutely, we would be able to mix and match, for want of a better word. The only caveat I would put across that is the SIM management platform. It would mean sort of access to two platforms initially for managing the estate, one for the eSIMs and one for the standard SIMs that comes with the standard network APNs.
Brilliant. And just as not as a follow-up, but another question for yourself. We've been asked about confirming the 180 countries that the network availability. Now, I'm not asking that you reel that off, all 180 countries, but if we've got the person's name there, but are you able to follow up with them and help them understand the coverage there?
Absolutely. As we can do this after the webinar for that individual, but at Zest, as I say, this is the start of our official launch of eSIM interchannel. So what we'll be providing all our channel partners is collateral around eSIM that they can use, they can rebrand. As part of that collateral, clearly we'll be sort of highlighting the regions, the countries, etc. that eSIM will working. So yes, it's a short answer.
Brilliant, thank you, Anton, and thanks for not naming all 180 on this webinar. John, I'm going to appeal to you. We've got a question here about APNs. Can customer-specific private APNs be provisioned to eSIMs as normal? And would we effectively need a private APN per network? Or is there a completely different option for this type of requirement? For example, a dedicated private APN provided by yourselves that can be securely routed to the client. There's probably a joint question there, but I'm going to kick off with John to start with.
Okay, so short answer, yes, we can do all of that. No, the way we typically do it, and Anton will probably elaborate on this, is understanding what the actual requirement is and then build into that requirement. So we do have standard APNs that are provided. Again, don't assume eSIM's any different to a standard SIM when it comes to the actual connectivity part for things like your APN connectivity. So we can provide the public and private and dedicated APNs that you need, much the same as we do today and Zest4 do today in respect of the standard SIMs that have been used historically. But Anton, I don't know whether you want to add anything specific on the Zest.
Yeah, absolutely. What we'll be doing is working with partners on things like this and looking at each rollout specifically. So obviously Zest4 have our own sort of dedicated APN. For smaller rollouts, the odd SIM here and there, then obviously we'll be routing everything down our own APN in the same way that we do with all the 4 networks that we operate with in the UK today. However, if the customer has a larger rollout or has a requirement for a VPN, etc., then we can look at putting a customer specific APN in place. So it's not shared, it's their APN. Again, it would add a little extra cost onto that, as you'd imagine, because we've got to build a specific APN for that customer. But absolutely, the options are going to be there. And at Zest, what we'll do is, as I say, look at each case sort of individually, and we'll be able to sort of quote you or work with you to give the customer options moving forwards.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure if this is specifically related to yourself, Anton, and your existing base. So you may or may not be able to answer, but will the eSIM solution be available on the AnywhereSIM solution, or will it just be a single network at any one time? I think someone's looking for a wee bit of clarification.
Yeah, so no, I know what sort of getting at here. So in the same way that we offer a roaming SIM at the moment within the UK, it'll be one single network, but one single carrier, but roams onto 4 networks. We'll have the same capability with eSIM. So if needed, we can supply you a SIM that is operating within the UK and using multiple networks, or within the EU and using multiple networks. What we've done as part of this solution is broken it down into zones. So if a customer is looking for an eSIM solution that's also a roaming SIM, what we'll be able to do is offer you different zones, different roaming zones for each SIM. So you won't necessarily, as an example in the UK, if you wanted O2, EE, H3G, etc., you won't have to be over the air switching the profile each time you want to use it. The SIM will automatically work out which network is best for it in that location and use that network and switch if need be. If that makes sense.
And I think yeah, no, absolutely. I think this follows on from another question, which you've kind of touched on there, is do we have to keep the eSIM on a single network and if needed manually switch, or can it move freely between networks automatically to gain the best signal? And I think that's kind of part of the eSIM promise, right?
Yeah, same thing. So effectively, because we'll provide a zone, so UK may be zone 2, and I'm making this bit up now. But let's say UK was zone 2. Within zone 2, you would have sort of 3 or 4 networks, and the eSIM would just, as required, bounce from one network to the other within the UK in the same way that a roaming SIM would. So yes, we have that capability. Again, I suppose it's the same with normal SIM. Sort of the more networks you have that it's going to be using, sort of the more capabilities built into it. It can add a little bit of cost. Traditionally, a roaming SIM is more expensive than a single network SIM. It's not going to be any different on this. But we will work with a partner, work with the end user to identify the best solution at the optimum rate.
Absolutely, and it comes back to that resilience message, and that's what you're looking for an eSIM solution. Okie dokie. So
just following on from that one of the things that will make a significant difference though. So as an example, if you've got an eSIM that you're using as a roaming SIM within the UK, so it's bouncing across sort of 3 or 4 networks within the UK, but then the location of that device moves, and it may be that, I don't know, that device has been deployed in Italy now. Historically, you would incur roaming charges, so you'd pay a much higher rate while that device was being used in Italy. What this SIM will be able to allow you to do is to switch your carrier profile and use a local network in Italy. And you could use roaming networks in Italy, but again, because it's local, you're not going to be charged the roaming rates. You're effectively using Italian SIM roaming across Italian networks.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for delving a little bit deeper there. So I've got a couple of questions on voice, John, and I hope I'm going to peel over to you and give Anton a break. First question is, what's the future for voice capabilities on eSIM? We've got to follow up with, can voice and/or text be used on the device with an eSIM, i.e. for remote troubleshooting by SMS?
Absolutely, yes. So the eSIM is just as capable with SMS, both to and from the device, as well as with voice to and from the device. The voice element in some areas, and this sort of becomes a little bit more regulatory now, is more determined on the purpose of voice. So when people historically think of M2M and IoT, they're thinking of devices talking to devices, and therefore there isn't a need to have voice. There are scenarios where that is used, for example, lone worker. So it's just, again, understanding the use case to make sure that the right solution is enabled and deployed. But in terms of can they be used, yes.
If I could just add to that, Kaylee, from a Zest4 point of view. So as we build the profile for the end user on behalf of the partner, we'll have the ability at that point to add voice or SMS sort of capabilities. What we won't be able to do from an eSIM point of view is add sort of voice bundles or text bundles as you would get on a standard SIM. So all voice will be charged on a per call basis or per text basis. But what we'll be able to do at the point of activation is allow the users to see, if it's on multiple networks, which of the 4 networks will allow voice and at what rates, and vice versa. So it will be fully visible, and what we'll be able to do within the portal as well, because again, flexibility is everything on eSIM. Our partners will be able to go on and actually turn voice on or turn voice off at any point should they wish to, and the same with sort of SMS. So we're handing over some elements of control to the partners to be able to sort of fully manage their end users.
Brilliant, and thank you so much for going into a bit more detail there. And just another question for you there, Anton. Thank you so much for all the audience questions, these are brilliant. Will eSIM be available for phones and dongles, or is it just for IoT devices? So
I suppose phones and dongles. So it's not designed for phones. Saying that, if the sort of phone will take a sort of standard form factor SIM, one of the triple SIMs, or the dongle will, then the eSIM will work in that. as part of testing and development of this, I've had sort of eSIMs working in sort of true IoT devices. I've had some in a tablet, I've had some in a phone, etc. I'm not saying it's going to work in every type of device, but there will be a large percentage of devices that it will work in. So I'd say most tablets and some phones.
Brilliant, thank you very much. John, I'm going to peel this next question to you, and this sort of comes around the safety element of eSIM. What's to stop somebody accidentally uploading a new profile in error to an eSIM?
So from an IoT eSIM perspective, somebody can't inadvertently pull a profile down. The reason being they're pushed from a central point. Obviously, there is privileges and access required to be able to do that. So users can't just pick up a device. So if we go back to the last question about can it be used in a phone, if an IoT eSIM was put into a phone, you wouldn't then be able to say download a different profile. So it's all secured, it's all GSMA specification and standards around the remote SIM provisioning piece. And that's again, we sort of spoke earlier about the difference between eSIM and multi-IMSI. The eSIM has the GSMA specification, the GSMA standards that have to be followed, whereas they're not necessarily there for multi-IMSI. So to stop waffling and to give the definitive answer is that the end user wouldn't have access to those profiles to be able to perform that request.
Thanks very much. Okay, so we're going to go to our last question. And thank you again, everybody, for filling out the questions. And again, like I said, the webinar will be made on demand. How do eSIMs stack up commercially against the standard NBB requirement? Or is it more suited to a long-term remote deployment?
So I'll take that one from a commercial point of view. So if we're looking at a true IoT type deployment where smaller amounts of data are going to be used, i.e., megabytes, 100 megabytes, 500 megabytes, so a gig, I suppose, up to a gig, then commercially eSIM will stack up. And in some cases will potentially better than a standard SIMs. If you're looking for a mobile broadband SIM type device that's using 20, 30, 40, 50 gig unlimited type of scenarios, then eSIM is not going to be the proposition. It wouldn't stack up for that type of thing. So it's not going to replace a full-on mobile broadband sort of SIM that's using 30, 40 gig a month. What it is going to do though, it's going to sort of replace the need for a standard SIM in true IoT rollouts, smaller data numbers, etc.
Brilliant, thanks very much there. So again, thank you for all the questions. They've been absolutely brilliant. We've come to the top of the hour, but if there are any further questions about eSIM and the Zest4 offering, please do reach out to Anton directly, and he'll be pleased to follow up with everybody. Again, this session has been recorded and will be made available from Zest4 over the coming days. But again, I just want to thank you and thank John and Anton for their time on today's sort of introduction to eSIM there. So thank you again, take care and have a wonderful day.
Cheers all.